It's January 20th, 330 BC, and we find ourselves in the Zagros mountain pass near today's 100,000-strong Iranian city of Yasuj. Back then it was called the Persian Gate, and it opened the way to the heart of the Persian Empire, Persepolis. Today, only an archaeological site remains, but at the time, it was the center of the most powerful and wealthiest empire in the world. Here at the Persian Gate, one of the decisive battles of Alexander III of Macedon, better known as Alexander the Great, was unfolding as he pushed deeper into Persia. At 25 years old, this young Macedonian king had been on this massive campaign for 4 years, and now it seemed his goal was within reach. He wasn't aiming for anything less than to conquer the entire Persian Empire, which stretched from the Himalayas to Egypt, and to become the undisputed king of all Asia. The results of Alexander's campaign so far were staggering. The ruling Persian king, Darius, had already fled in humiliation from 2 major battles. Alexander had completely taken control of the most important parts of Egypt, and practically all of today's Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. The largest city in the world at that time, Babylon, surrendered to him without a fight. And now, Persepolis, the heart of the Persian Empire, was within his grasp. But it wouldn't be as easy as it seemed. The governor of the region, Ariobarzanes, had blocked the path through the Persian Gate and lured Alexander's careless troops into a deadly trap. The losses were the greatest the Macedonian king had suffered in his entire campaign. For a whole month, he struggled in vain to break through the valiant defenders of the pass. It was only when local mountain tribes revealed a secret path that Alexander, with part of his army, could outflank the enemy and attack from 2 sides that victory was finally achieved. Ariobarzanes and his fellow fighters were killed, and the road to Persepolis was open. Here, Alexander plundered a legendary state treasury. Among other treasures, he seized 5 tons of gold, making him the richest man in the world, and ensuring he would never need funding from home for the rest of his campaigns. 4 months later, during one of his notorious drunken celebrations, an indulgence he was known to favor, he was persuaded to set fire to the magnificent royal palace. The city's most precious section went up in flames, and his soldiers, with his approval, killed men and sold women and children into slavery. This was unusual. The city had surrendered willingly, and Alexander was normally known for his clemency in such situations. But this was different. It was symbolic. 150 years earlier, when the Persians defeated the Greeks at Thermopylae and reached Athens, they had looted the temples there. Alexander, who identified with his Greek roots, and the thousands of Greek soldiers under his command, knew this well. And now, after years of conflict, revenge was finally complete. Alexander was born in 356 BCE in the capital of the Macedonian kingdom, Pella, about 50 kilometers from Thessaloniki. Both of his parents deserve special mention. His father, Philip II of Macedon, was the king of Macedonia. He elevated his country to unprecedented heights, and later, during Alexander's own lifetime, even managed to militarily defeat the strongest Greek city-states, led by Athens. He united all of them, except Sparta, into what became known as the Corinthian League, and he himself stood at its head. By the time Alexander reached adulthood, his father was virtually the ruler of all Greece. 2 years later, however, Philip would be assassinated by his personal guard, and apparently also his lover, Pausanias. Alexander's mother, Olympias, came from the royal family of Epirus, which ruled an area roughly corresponding to modern-day Albania. She was a fiery and ambitious woman, widely disliked at Philip's court, and, truth be told, even her husband, who had 4 other wives, gradually began to avoid her. Olympias set as her main goal securing the succession for her son Alexander, and was willing to do virtually anything to achieve it. There is still speculation about her involvement in Philip's murder. She reportedly had another of Philip's wives, and her child burned alive. She outlived her son and would later take revenge on those she believed were responsible for Philip's death. Even she eventually met her end, and shortly before turning 60, she was stoned to death by the families of her many victims. Let's go back about 25 years. Alexander is 15, and his father ensures he receives the best possible education. His mentor is one of the greatest philosophers of the ancient world, Aristotle. It is he who gives the young Alexander a foundation in all the major disciplines, a deep general knowledge, exceptional independent thinking skills, and strong social abilities. Alexander is now well prepared for his life's mission, at least in theory, but he still seems too young and inexperienced. That changes at 18. His father entrusts him with his first major responsibility in battle, and it is the most important one. At the Battle of Chaeronea, fighting for everything against the coalition of Athens and Thebes, young Alexander commands the Macedonian cavalry so skillfully that he completely decimates the so-called Sacred Band, an elite Theban unit made up of 150 pairs of male lovers, renowned for their loyalty to one another. 2 years later, when his father is murdered, the Greek city-states and surrounding tribes sense that it is the perfect moment to shake off Macedonian rule. Here, Alexander again demonstrates the decisiveness that few would expect from a 20-year-old. He brutally suppresses all revolts and even levels the city of Thebes to the ground. Then he has the Greeks reaffirm their loyalty to the Corinthian League in the form established by Philip a year and a half earlier. At this point, he has free rein to pursue his life's mission, the campaign into Persia, which his father had planned but never carried out. In May 334 BCE, Alexander crosses the Hellespont, today's Dardanelles, to the Asian shore. The campaign that would go down in history has begun. Alexander commands 40,000 men, on foot and horseback, traveling a distance of more than 30,000 kilometers. The campaign will last 12 years, a journey of one victory after another. Alexander is never defeated, and in the end, an empire of unimaginable scale lies at his feet, one no European had ever imagined. In the first 4 years of his campaign, he defeats the armies of the Persian king Darius III 3 times, captures ports in modern-day Syria and Lebanon, and removes Persian naval influence. He reaches Egypt, visits its sacred ancient sites, and founds Alexandria on the coast, a port that today is home to 4 million people and handles 80% of Egypt's imports and exports. Some cities, such as Tyre or Gaza, are sacked, and their inhabitants are mercilessly slaughtered or sold into slavery. Elsewhere, Alexander acts generously, establishing good relations with local rulers, whose cooperation is essential for governing such a vast empire. By early 330 BCE, Alexander is in Persepolis, having achieved nearly everything he desired. But one problem remains. King Darius is still on the run, until Alexander catches him, forces him to abdicate, and hands over power. His triumph will not be complete. So the campaign continues, leading him north into modern-day Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Here, he faces a previously unknown problem: discontent among his own troops. The soldiers and many of their commanders have endured an exhausting campaign. Instead of marching through remote mountain regions, far removed from the civilization they know, they long for orders to return. This is especially true after learning that the Persian king Darius has died. Darius had sought refuge with Bessus, the ruler of Bactria, a kingdom in modern Afghanistan. Bessus treated the dead king with the utmost respect, having his remains transported to a royal tomb and buried with full honors. But when the treacherous Bessus fell into Alexander's hands, he ordered Bessus's ears and nose cut off, leaving him mutilated and crucified at the site of his betrayal. By this time, Alexander had fully conquered all of Persia, yet his ambitions pushed him even further into India. This uncharted, wild land was not only exotic to Europeans, but incomprehensible, filled with wars among local rulers and all sorts of natural hazards. Here, Alexander faced fierce resistance, unlike anything he had encountered before. His enemies deployed war elephants, and the morale of his troops steadily declined. Alexander himself resorted to increasing acts of cruelty in these challenging circumstances. Ultimately, he had to abandon his goal of reaching the distant outer sea his army could endure no more. The return journey to Persia followed. Some of Alexander's forces traveled by sea, while the rest, including Alexander himself, moved overland in two groups. Even this was fraught with challenges. European soldiers increasingly resented Alexander's adoption of Eastern customs and the integration of Persians into his army, including his elite cavalry. A particular point of contention was his demand that all who approached him, including Europeans, kneel and press their foreheads to the ground in the Persian manner. To freedom-loving Greeks, this was the ultimate humiliation. Alexander even had his own historian, Callisthenes, a pupil of Aristotle, executed for trying to dissuade him from these Eastern practices. By the age of 23, Alexander likely considered himself a demigod, a belief he had held since childhood. In 323 BCE, Alexander returned to Babylon, planning new campaigns this time into Arabia, Sicily, Italy, and even as far as Gibraltar. In May, however, he suddenly fell ill, and his condition quickly worsened. The cause is uncertain. It may have been Nile fever, the result of prolonged heavy drinking, or one of the many battle injuries he sustained while always fighting at the front lines. Poisoning is also possible. The most likely candidates are either white hellebore mixed into his wine or arsenic. A month before his 33rd birthday, in June 323 BCE, Alexander the Great lay on a modest bed in Babylon. His highest-ranking officers gathered around him, asking one question: who will inherit his empire? To the strongest, Alexander replied, exhausted. These were his last words, and we can only imagine what followed.